Free Golden Eagles for War Thunder. Download the app in the description below. Hey guys, welcome back to War Thunder, and welcome to what I think is going to really treat up your Friday evening, a fantastic carry match on Advance of the Rhine. This is back from 2016, so a little bit of overdue footage. Yes, there's no stabilizers here, yes, there's not some of the newer vehicles, but overall, it's not about the vehicles used, it's not about the tactics, albeit I will talk a little bit about that as well. This match is a perfect example of just why I love realistic ground forces. Now, what I'm doing here is to explain a bit of the background story, is I'm trying to spade my Tier 4 and Tier 5 Americans. Obviously, this is about 3 months ago. The M56 Scorpion, a fantastic tank, although open top, so very vulnerable to machine gun fire. I'm using a combo of APHE and Heat FS. APHE mainly against Germans if I'm fighting Leos, which we are fighting in this match, and the Heat FS if I come across a Russian medium or heavy tank. The idea behind playing the game in the aggressive role that I like to do is to rush for the capture point. Capture it, hold it for as long as possible, wait for your team to come and supply you, and if you do it well, you can very easily win the match for your team. However, the enemy team is doing the exact same thing, and as I was approaching Alpha, the enemy team has already run in through by, I think, about 2 Leos. So a slight change of plans will be in order here. I can't just rush into the capture point and, go Rambo on them both. What I can do, however, is use the ruined building in front of me to climb up the hill and hopefully kill them both, or at least damage them, before they can spot me. And being that Leopard drivers are notorious for having just negligible situational awareness, I just tended to push on, take the first one out with a solid APHE shell, and then I make a mistake. I swapped to the Heat FS. This is where the mistake comes into play. Now, the tactic for this other Leo is he knows where I am, so I stand still for a little bit, and then I try to use a bit of a, well, simply put, a time-saving tactic. I want to kill him as fast as possible and get into the capture point. So I push the tank forward sideways, just enough to give him that, kind of a little bit of armor for him to try to shoot at. So he takes the shot. It's a 6-second waste now, so I can now take a shot at him without being damaged too much. The problem is I loaded Heat FS, meaning that I've damaged his loader and his driver, but his gunner is still up. He reloads and he puts a solid shot down through the middle of my tank. Luckily enough, it wasn't enough to kill me. Now, I've lost my transmission, I've been set on fire, and I've lost my commander, but I'm still in functional shape. And the reason I always apply such a similar tactic is because my idea is well executing the spawn points. If you know how the spawn point mechanic works, you can technically single-handedly carry any match that has a single capture point purely because you can spawn in, theoretically, an unlimited amount of vehicles, seeing that you have a good lineup setup. If you have a bad lineup, then there's no point playing RB at all, because the tactics of RB ground forces develop in the hangar, not in the match itself. Now, with the 2 Leos being taken out, I've repaired my transmission. I can see a third one on the right-hand side. I don't know if you can be able to get a snippet of him there. He's pushing towards the cap. Now, an M22 Locust. I don't know what this guy was doing, and I'm a huge hater of people who troll squad and derp squad. Does something actually quite useful for me. He gets himself killed by the Leo on the right-hand side, but it gives me a very easy bait on the Leo that I was trying to go after as he pushes out from the side of the corner. And then the irony of the combo of APHE and Heat FS comes into play. I now bounce an APHE shell off the frontal upper plate of a Leo. When attacking targets from the front, I suggest that you use shells with good amounts of penetration, knowing where you want to penetrate. When it comes to attacking targets from the side, you want to use APHE. This is where I make a double mistake. I now load Heat FS, seeing that APHE disappointed me, but I then go into a situation where I'm engaging a Leo in a side attack. And this time, the APHE would have been the better option and would have supplied me with an easy kill. And to make matters worse, since the match has gone on for so long, the enemy mouse has now reached the capture point, and that means the kind of phase 2 of the match starts to take place. This is where I have to now respawn, be careful about my respawn options, and because I'm going through the spading process, I decide, slightly foolishly, to take out the F9F Cougar. Now, the Cougar is an aircraft I think not a lot of people can enjoy. I've flown the Panthers, and whilst in air battles I don't think they're very usable, they're pretty horrible actually. In ground forces, the Panthers perform rather well. They have the option for the 6 Hwa rockets, the 2 1,000-pound bombs, and they actually manage to not compress too hard and enable you to be able to strafe and bomb enemy targets rather efficiently. The Cougar is slightly faster, but also compresses like nothing else I've ever seen, and has a good roll rate. It sort of reminds me of the Focke-Wulf. The Focke-Wulf is not a bad aircraft, it's just something that I would never want to use in ground battles. As for jets, at 9.0, I don't think I'm ever going to fly this thing out again, ever since it's been spaded. Since the Cougar compresses at high speeds, I have to make a very gradual ascent, drop 2 bombs, and eliminate 2 T-62s. Very easy way to get rid of a couple of players that are simply piled up on the capture point. But there's no time to rest, because immediately your role as an attack aircraft or close air support is to immediately eliminate any aircraft in the area. So the Horton is a very, very dangerous beast. That thing could potentially strafe the entire team, so it would be in your best interest to get rid of it as soon as possible. And to efficiently take out enemy aircraft, one of the tactics I like to use is to slowly spot over the enemy plane spawn point. And whenever you can spot a, well, grey dot in the sky, you want to approach them slightly from below. So go into a dive. I don't know what exactly I'm fighting here, and I didn't know until it was too late. It was an LA-15 who knew very well what he was doing and very well where I was coming from. My shots were all over the place, just not where they should have been, and I get pilot knocked out. A foolish, aggressive mistake, and one that would have cost you the match in air battles. But not in ground forces, because having acquired so many spawn points, having done a lot of damage efficiently, quickly at the start of the match, enables us to now spawn in like literally whatever we want. And to solidify the fact in this match, I had to go with the M103. This is the one and only tank that I will always be a fan of. The 120mm gun is phenomenal, it outputs a huge amount of damage. And for those of you interested in the recent patch of 1.67, albeit this is old footage, the solid AP shell that the stock M103 comes with has been buffed to oblivion. So if you have suffered from the stock syndrome in the M103, now will be a perfect time to start using it again. Now, those of you who have been paying attention to the map have seen that the alpha has slowly been pushed back. We're now moving into phase 3 of the match development, which is the re-engagement of the capture point. We're going back in for the objective. And here, I have to give a huge shout out to the team, not just for the start, but throughout the match. Both teams, in fact, have continuously tried to go for the objective over and over again, because you'll meet some players that like to kind of evade the objective, flank around the side of the map, maybe sit in the enemy spawn, camp in the back of their own spawn in an ATGM. Obviously, you know, players can play however they want, it is a game, but if you do want to win the match effectively and also get a bunch of RP out of it, and make sure that your matches are reasonably lengthy and provide you with a nice amount of RP at the end, it would be in your best interest to always focus on the objective and consecutively try to pull wins out of your matches. And as I see that my team has captured the point and starting to prepare a bit of a defensive perimeter around it, I decide to instead go for a bit of a wider route, and I spot myself an Su-100. This is where I make a lethal mistake, albeit not a very big one, by shooting into the debris with the heat FS instead of trying to get a cleaner shot. However, it's an Su-100, and I'm in an M103, which a lot of people tend to forget the weak spots of. It has quite a few. I mean, the lower glacis, the turret ring, just above and below the gun are little, very weakly armored clips. The M103's main advantage, and the reason why I love playing it, and I hope it stays that way, is because not a lot of people use it. And so when you see it on the battlefield, people tend to panic, not to know where the common weak spots are. Now, as I'm pushing back into Alpha to help my team secure it, I get a nice little frag on the ZSU-37, and then I get shot from the side, luckily a bounce, by what I later discovered to be a Jagdpanzer 45, the Hanomag Henschel, which was back at the time of this patch, I think at 7.7, so a very, very high battle rating for this tank, and it's a very hard vehicle to play, albeit it's actually faster than the Leopard in a straight line. It suffers from not having any turret, and obviously the crew is extremely cramped together, often resulting into one-shot kills. Not a problem, trade another kill, and continue pushing on. This is where effectively the match turns into stage 4, which is the push towards the enemy capture point. And if you're watching the map in the bottom right corner, you will have noticed that 3, if not 4 of our players right now are pushing towards the enemy spawn point. This is not to spawn camp, because there's a bit of a difference between deliberately going to the enemy spawn point to kill all the players and try to get some easy frags. The idea is to push and confine the enemy players into a very small compartment from which they will take a lot of time to reach the capture point and try to re-engage the ticket bleed, meaning you can potentially get a very, very easy win. But we're not quite ready to push the enemy spawn. As a matter of fact, the enemy team kept pushing on, and there's a King Tiger 105, a little bit unlucky. I'm going to assume here that it's a player who hasn't got a very good top tier lineup, so he had to take a 7.0 tank into an 8.0 or a potential 7.7 being up tiered lineup. And I decided against the common idea to go into the enemy spawn and sit there, and instead I thought I would put my heavy tank into the middle of the capture point and simply wait. That is one of the other tactics that you can use. You don't have to push the enemy. I mean, with only one objective in the game, the enemy will come to you. So I thought this match is over. All I have to do is just sit here, do nothing, and if something does pop up, it's likely going to bounce, not kill me in one shot, and we'll be able to secure the match short and easy. The enemy team is now spawning in some Yak 9Ts, they're all crashing, we have an M42 Duster in the area, a bunch of other AAAs. Surely there's nothing that the enemy team can do. And whilst we sit here, a quick debate to kill our time. The spawn point mechanic is something that I think adds a huge plus value to the development of the RB matches, and I'll explain to you shortly why, but the way they work is that by receiving hits, doing damage, or getting assists, kills, you receive spawn points. The more damage you do, the more spawn points you'll receive. Different vehicles of different classes cost different amount of spawn points to spawn back in. So a bomber will cost more than a fighter, and a heavy tank will cost more than an SPAA. In general though, if you're driving out a medium tank, doing nothing in the match should still be enough to spawn in an SPAA regardless of how much damage you do or fail to do, and if you're playing in a heavy tank, you should be able to receive enough damage and tank it or at least take somebody out to effectively spawn in an SPAA as well. This is worst case scenario. And I've showcased that very well in the Vulcan video back in December, where I went in a match, and I managed to fail to do any damage starting on, having spawned in a Vulcan which has very little penetration, and yet I was able to acquire enough points to spawn back in to another vehicle, and then proceed to help my team win the match. And what spawn points do, albeit in a very snowball effect, is separate the good players from the bad ones. Separate those with good lineups from those with only taking one vehicle out. Separate those who know which vehicle to spawn and when, and which teammates to help and how. It's a very simple form of filtering the good from the bad, and frankly with the current state of the game where there's not enough players in RB to create an actual ranked mode, this is the best that we're going to get. And people who are good and efficient at playing top tier or any tier of ground forces don't really have any complaints except for the RP gain. And if there's anything that we should be talking about, it is the RP gain, which is round about 2 times too slow. As for the spawn point mechanic, I think it's one of the best mechanics that you're going to have in the game by a long shot. And it's something that separates War Thunder from other games because it enables people who are efficient and effective to get more out of the game. And to return back to the game at hand here, the Cougar Blitz that left the enemy spawn has taken out a cannon breach. It in itself is not a problem, but we've also been flanked by a Hanomag Henschel that's now sitting behind me, and there's very little thing that I can do here as I also get ATGM'd, albeit I didn't quite know where from. In a very quick succession, we've been taken out by a trio of players in a very well coordinated counterattack. Welcome to stage 5. Now I've opted out to respawn in the M103, and at this point the capture point is still in our possession. I decided to go for the route in the upper northern part of the map, so flanking in the exact same spot that the Hanomag Henschel approached, which was hopefully the way to approach the enemy team without being spotted immediately. My teammates, though, at this point, have moved somewhere in between the enemy spawn and Alpha, so I can't use them for any kind of help. Now, being a heavy tank, the M103 isn't particularly slow, but it still took me a good minute to get around the side of the map, and our teammates have very swiftly moved into position. This was a clear case of both teams having purely the best players that were available in that match still left alive. Now, I'm not disclosing the fact that there could have been a player in this game that was extremely good and could have carry the match better or even more efficiently than the players currently left, but they are not in the match anymore, and the filtering works in such a specific way with spawn points that only the finest remains. And this is where I make an interesting call. You see, I didn't want to go into the capture point. Capturing the point means that you're pointing out to everybody in the map exactly where your location is. Instead, I make a quick perimeter check through, making sure that wherever the enemy might be, I find them before they find me, and with the tickets still being in our advantage, I'm not in a huge press of time. This is one of the most effective ways of making sure that you don't have to respawn in vehicles over and over again. It often happens, and it happened to me plenty when I was, learning and experiencing the game mode as it is, to just simply rush into the capture point and then get eliminated by the same player. Because if you want to protect the capture point as best as possible, the easiest way to do it is to sit somewhere around it with a nice view of the capture point itself, which often results into the enemy driving straight into what pretty much is a trap. And little did I know that was exactly the plan of the enemy. The location where I just came from now houses an IT-1, and the Hanomag Henschel that killed me a spawn point before has now flanked all the way around, creating a clever distraction. Now, I've respawned a heavy tank twice, which means I'm now slowly starting to run out of spawn points. See, this entire monopole of trying to grab as many spawn points early in the match to be able to carry effectively late on if so needed resulted in me now having to make a very gutting decision. Instead of spawning the M103, I make a very ballsy decision of spawning the Vulcan instead. The Vulcan is a weak SPA. No armor, very boxy, mediocre top speed. It is amphibious, albeit no use of it on the Rhine, with very bad penetration on the main 20mm revolver gun. The reason why I spawned the Vulcan was because I'm trying to spade it, and spading SPAs is very hard to do if you don't actually play them. Now, the enemy hasn't got any planes in the air. I mean, we have a Hunter that's flying around, so likely is we don't need an SPA. The idea was that I was confident my team would be able to clear the enemy players, and I would simply, well, win the match by getting a couple of assists. And then the Chieftain gets taken out. That leaves a Centurion Mark III. We now have a 6.3 completely up-tier tank that, even though it might be using APDS, is going to struggle against two players. And our B-57 is struggling to find the targets to try to bomb. I'm now in a position where I have to use an SPA with 40 or 60 millimeters of total penetration to try to take out a Hanomag Henschel and an IT-1. Not the best of tactics. And I know the Hanomag Henschel has pushed into the capture point, but he's also using the trams that are laid on the side as a very effective way of covering it. And then a T-10M executes the Centurion Mark III. Let me try to explain this to you in plain words if you've never played top-tier Matchmaker. Out of those 3 tanks, I can only kill 1, and even that from the side. And the B-57 just killed them. So to those of you who are not very aware of the way top-tier matchmaking is, or the penetrating values on certain vehicles, I'll translate it like this. I'm about to go against 2 players, which are both in extremely superior tanks. I'm in an SPA, and I can only pen one of them through the back, that is the IT-1, and the T-10, I could only pen him if I was somehow sideways on, shooting down into the engine deck. This really isn't an ideal scenario very late in the match when you're running out of spawn points, so I shoot the T-10M, try to blind him for as long as possible, mark him for my B-57, he comes in, swift and very fast in reaction time, and this is where I'm only left against 1 player. However, the IT-1 puts a very solid shot into my left-hand side, effectively looking I'm dead, but I'm not going to use my fire extinguishers as that would prevent me from being able to fire at him. Instead, I focus on the rocket, disable it before I use my fire extinguisher, immediately deploy it, and since I'm in the capture point, my repair speed is going to be faster. All I have to do now is survive for 10 seconds and hope that someone on my team eliminates the IT-1 before the end of the match. The tickets are bleeding, we have the advantages again, all I have to do is not die to the IT-1. However, I sense that the B-57 might have been out of bombs, so I apply a very, very interesting tactic. A tactic that we all used once as kids. Hide and seek. You see, the IT-1 can only kill me if he can shoot at me. And positioning myself with round about the same width as the tram, the IT-1 effectively simply can't put a shell into me. And seeing he's still repairing or ineffective to move, the match is over. The tickets are about to bleed out, and being this is a slightly more tricky way to win a match, it definitely showcases that even an M163 Vulcan fighting against a IT-1 is an adequate opponent. Nothing else that I can say but a good game. And it wasn't a good game just because I had a blast playing. It wasn't just a good game because we won at the end or because I had given it my best. It was a good game because towards the end, I knew I was fighting only the finest players available in that match, and that wouldn't have been possible without the spawn point mechanic, which frankly, whether you love it or hate it, is one that is most likely here to stay, and it damn as well should. It's a great one. For those of you who don't like it, you might as well be suffering from a small case of learn to play.